The recent trade dispute between the United States and Canada marks a significant moment in North American economic relations. It illustrates how assumptions, when left untested, can lead to serious miscalculations. The U.S. administration entered the situation believing that long-standing partnerships would naturally bend under pressure. Instead, the response revealed the limits of that approach. Rather than reacting emotionally, Canada relied on established procedures, institutional preparation, and policy continuity. This contrast shaped the outcome from the beginning. What initially appeared to be a straightforward negotiation evolved into a broader lesson about interdependence, leverage, and the importance of predictability in international relations. This episode is not about personal rivalries or dramatic confrontations. It is about how modern economies function and how decisions made at the highest level can produce consequences far beyond their original intent. When the U.S. administration returned to office in early 2025, it brought with it a renewed focus on renegotiating existing economic arrangements. The leadership believed that revisiting trade agreements could quickly produce better terms. However, this belief was not accompanied by updated economic assessments or broad consultation with industry stakeholders. Canada, meanwhile, approached the situation with a clear understanding of how integrated the two economies had become. Decades of shared supply chains, regulatory alignment, and cross-border investment meant that any disruption would affect both sides. That reality shaped Canada's response. Instead of seeking confrontation, Canadian officials emphasized continuity, stability, and adherence to previously agreed frameworks. This difference in approach set the tone for what followed and would ultimately define the direction of the dispute. Trade agreements are not merely political documents. They are operational systems that guide daily commercial activity. In this case, the United States questioned provisions of an agreement it had previously endorsed, while Canada emphasized the importance of honoring negotiated terms. Canada's response focused on structure rather than rhetoric. Officials consistently pointed to dispute resolution mechanisms built into the agreement. These mechanisms exist precisely to prevent unilateral actions from destabilizing trade flows. This methodical approach reduced uncertainty for markets and signaled that Canada intended to operate within established rules. By doing so, it reassured businesses and investors that decision-making would remain predictable even during disagreement. This emphasis on process proved influential as the situation developed. As discussions continued, attention shifted to the economic realities underlying the dispute. Manufacturing, agriculture, and energy sectors across North America depend on uninterrupted cross-border movement. Even minor delays can increase costs and disrupt planning. Industry leaders began assessing potential outcomes. Automotive manufacturers reviewed supply chain vulnerabilities. Agricultural exporters evaluated market access risks. Energy traders monitored pricing volatility. These reactions were not speculative. They were based on existing operational dependencies. Canada's responses were calibrated to reflect these realities without escalating tensions. By highlighting sector-specific impacts, Canadian officials ensured that discussions remained grounded in economic facts rather than political messaging. Within the United States, business organizations increasingly expressed concern about uncertainty. Markets respond poorly to unpredictability, particularly when long-term agreements are involved. As questions mounted, investment decisions slowed. Canada's consistent messaging helped stabilize expectations. Officials avoided sudden announcements and instead communicated through formal channels. This reinforced confidence that any actions taken would be measured and legally grounded. The contrast between approaches became clearer over time. One side emphasized rapid leverage, the other emphasized institutional continuity. This difference influenced not only negotiations, but also public perception and market behavior. Part 6. Energy trade emerged as a particularly sensitive area. Infrastructure on both sides of the border was built with integrated flows in mind. Sudden changes risked inefficiencies and increased costs. Canadian policymakers acknowledged these risks and communicated openly with industry partners. Their goal was not disruption, but preparedness. By ensuring that contingency plans existed, they reduced the likelihood of reactive decision-making. This approach demonstrated how advanced planning can mitigate uncertainty. Rather than creating pressure through abrupt measures, Canada relied on transparency and predictability to maintain stability while protecting national interests. Part 7. As weeks passed, public discussion increasingly focused on economic impact rather than political positioning. Price fluctuations in key materials highlighted how interconnected the two economies had become. Consumers began noticing changes indirectly, particularly in housing-related materials and energy-linked costs. These developments underscored how trade policy decisions translate into everyday economic conditions. Canada continued to emphasize cooperation and adherence to existing agreements. By doing so, it framed the issue as a technical dispute rather than a political conflict, encouraging resolution through established mechanisms. Part 8. This situation also revealed how leadership styles influence outcomes. A focus on urgency can sometimes overshadow the value of consultation and analysis. In contrast, a focus on procedure can create space for de-escalation. Canada's strategy relied on institutional memory and prior preparation. Officials had studied earlier trade disruptions and designed responses intended to minimize volatility. That preparation proved effective when tensions rose. The lesson here is not about right or wrong personalities, but about the benefits of structured decision-making in complex economic systems. Part 9. Legal considerations soon entered the discussion. Business groups sought clarification on the scope of executive authority related to trade actions. Courts were asked to examine whether existing laws supported proposed measures. Judicial review introduced an additional layer of oversight. This process is designed to ensure that policy actions align with statutory frameworks. While legal proceedings take time, they provide stability by clarifying boundaries. Canada's reliance on treaty provisions strengthened its position in these discussions. By grounding responses in written agreements, it reduced ambiguity and reinforced the role of law in resolving disputes. Part 10. Market analysts began factoring potential outcomes into forecasts. Rather than reacting to headlines, they evaluated fundamentals, trade volumes, production capacity, and demand patterns. This analysis suggested that prolonged uncertainty would slow growth. Businesses tend to delay expansion when policy direction is unclear. These delays can accumulate, affecting employment and investment. Canada's consistent stance helped limit speculation. Clear communication allowed companies to plan based on known rules rather than shifting expectations. Part 11. International observers also took note. Trade partners around the world watch how agreements are managed, as it informs their own negotiations and risk assessments. By emphasizing reliability and rule-based engagement, Canada reinforced its reputation as a predictable partner. This perception matters in a global economy where trust influences long-term cooperation. The broader implication is that how disputes are handled can be as important as how they begin. Political analysts noted that economic outcomes often shape public opinion more than rhetoric. Stability tends to generate confidence, while uncertainty fuels concern. As the situation evolved, attention turned toward long-term implications. Would future negotiations prioritize predictability? Would institutional mechanisms be strengthened? These questions extended beyond the immediate dispute, touching on how North American cooperation might function going forward. Part 14. Quiet diplomatic engagement increased behind the scenes. These conversations focused on technical adjustments rather than public statements. Such discussions are often more productive. Canada's emphasis on professionalism facilitated these talks. By avoiding escalation, it kept channels open and preserved space for compromise. This phase demonstrated the value of patience in complex negotiations. Part 15. Economic indicators gradually stabilized as expectations adjusted. Markets prefer clarity, even when outcomes are imperfect. Reduced volatility signaled that resolution was possible. Canada's planning-oriented approach contributed to this stabilization. Businesses could assess risk more accurately and resume postponed decisions. The experience reinforced the importance of clear policy signals. Part 16. As attention shifted toward upcoming elections, policymakers considered how economic performance influences voter sentiment. Stability and predictability remained key factors. The trade dispute became a reference point in broader discussions about governance and decision-making. Analysts emphasized lessons learned rather than assigning blame. This reframing allowed for constructive evaluation. Part 17. Ultimately, adjustments in tone and pace helped ease tensions. Incremental steps replaced sweeping proposals. Dialogue regained prominence. Canada maintained its core position while remaining open to discussion. This balance preserved national interests without prolonging uncertainty. Resolution, while gradual, became achievable. Part 18. The episode highlighted how interconnected economies require careful stewardship. Sudden shifts can produce unintended effects across multiple sectors. Canada's experience demonstrated how preparation and institutional continuity can reduce risk. These principles are applicable beyond this specific case. They offer guidance for managing future challenges. Part 19. Looking ahead, policymakers on both sides are likely to place greater emphasis on consultation and data-driven analysis. Trust, once tested, must be reinforced through consistency. The dispute served as a reminder that agreements function best when respected and reviewed collaboratively. Such lessons contribute to long-term stability. Part 20. In conclusion, this situation was not defined by conflict, but by contrast in approach. One side emphasized immediacy, the other emphasized structure. The outcome showed the value of predictability in complex systems. Trade relationships depend on trust, process, and shared responsibility. When those elements are prioritized, challenges become manageable. This episode will likely influence future negotiations, encouraging greater respect for institutions and long-term planning over short-term pressure.